Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Impasto. Tonight we explore a world of one of the old masters. The sleep of reason produces monsters. Francisco Goya. Welcome to Spain, 1823.
I write to inform you that I will soon be leaving Spain behind. Know that I sail from her with a heavy heart, but the Spain I am leaving is not the one I once knew. War and sickness are everywhere. I tried my best to keep faith. But through my waning health, my body is telling me what my heart tried to ignore. It's time to stop fighting.
So is this... Oh, let's restart this and see if we can get subtitles properly. Which is really against you retaining your dominance.
Know that I sail from her with a heavy heart, but the Spain I am leaving is not the one I once knew. War and sickness are everywhere. I tried my best to keep faith, but through my waning health, my body is telling me what my heart tried to ignore. It's time to stop fighting. For what time I have left, I would like to know peace. I hope you understand why I cannot bear to remain in that house. So I'm leaving it to you, the hands of the future. You must be prepared for what I have left you. It will be hard to understand, and at times, it may even frighten you. My mind has taken me down dark roads better left untraveled. And even within the best of us, the sleep of reason produces monsters. Signed, with love, Goya, a su nieto.
It is truly quite rebellious. La Quinta del Sordo. But for this time, this out marks a dark period in his history and was trying to understand the reasons for his disappearance. But, welcome Lilith, welcome Sam, how are you both doing today? I mean, this game might well put the pain in Spain. At the same time, one must also consider that the pain in Spain might just stay mainly on the plane. You never quite know. And indeed, which is unreliable at the best of times. Candlelight, since which option Jonathan must have used to paint when the sun sank low. Through the darkest of days, he would let nothing interrupt his work. I'm not allowed to word myself. This door is locked. A letter from Signor Argueta to grandfather. To the true court painter, Francisco de Goya. I speak to you now as both your personal physician and a friend, which is why this letter is penned with the heaviest of hearts. I know you must seek relief from your inexplicable deafness, but it is a relief that medicine simply cannot provide. I will pray for your health, and that the hardship you have suffered does not warp your wondrous imagination. If your hearing swept a return, it will be the Lord who grants you it, not I. With best wishes and warm regards, Eugenio Garcia Arrieta. Alright, so forward really does lean purely on going through this particular door. Okay, house key. In our bag is a singular key at the moment to the other door of the house. I do love how much love they put into these paintings and bring them to life with some additional audio. Isn't the painting over the other doorway? No, just this. Okay. Grandfather's walkings. He always seemed so much happier during the days he could step outside without it. But as his illness worsened, he came to rely upon it more and more. A royal decree, the King's Manifesto, penned at the end of a long and brutal war. My father had hoped it would be the first step in a brighter future. However, it instead ordered the destruction of the Constitution, mass arrests, and the restoration of the Inquisition. It's always like a long, haunting corridor. Well, that's another time. Well, that's about all the paintings that I can find to appreciate. Bring us no beautifully painted sky.
This one looks familiar.
Child, name yourself.
Mariano Goya. We know you, boy. Grandson of the great Francisco de Goya, and a smear upon his legacy.
I don't want to be a smear.
A gambler, a drunkard, and a disappointment.
Are you here to make amends, or pick his bones dry?
Perhaps both.
Shame the way he sees you. Everything but what you truly are.
Yet, you should not have come here.
This is Zaragoza, your grandfather's home woven into the paint, and it stands at the brink of collapse. The town portends the dusk, the coming of calamity.
This is the artist's nightmare. And ye of flesh and bone have no place amongst it.
So something. Let's start with asking about grandfather here.
Oh yes, we are all quite familiar with the great Francisco de Goya.
'Twas by his hand that we were painted.
Pride of Spain and last of the old masters. Pity he couldn't change anything. Look at him, so marred in misery that he's brought these lands to ruin.
But then again, I can't imagine a wretch like you would care. It's not like you did before.
What are the masked men outside?
You speak of the holy men. They are the church's inquisition, the blessed bastion. They roam these darkened streets, purging that which does not belong.
They suffer not the heretic. By fire and brimstone, they will make our city pure.
And if I wished to leave?
So the boy wishes to leave.
That is much easier said than done. But perhaps. Very well, child. If you wish to leave Zaragoza, then seek out the blind man on the edge of town.
Yes. Consort with a madman like him enough, and I'm sure you'll find your way out of town.
One way or another.
No, it won't. Torvald spoke of a blind man through the alley. Perhaps he can help you. Guess we'll do a crouch. We do have a jump in the end. Let's do our best to stick to the shadows then. Shadows are nice and comfortable after all. You're the one I'm looking for, I take it?
Come, won't you sit with me? 'Twould be a shame to enjoy these stars alone. She was not always like this, you know. Please, do not blame Zaragoza for the state she's in. She was once so warm, before this oppressive curse left her fraught with fear and darkness.
Curse, you say?
You see, the hope has bled from her, and she must be reminded of her old days if she is to heal. Here, let me play you a song from her past. It'd do you more good to hear for yourself. Unfortunately, I know only fragments, and the rest is lost upon sheets scattered throughout the town.
It's not about the Inquisition of Nantan, so they are the primary obstacle to completing this quest.
Though they bear the Lord's crosses and noble insignia, they have twisted his teachings to justify man's greed and hatred. Do well to avoid them.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, about your sight.
Ah, one of the many things these shadows have claimed. Struck with a violent illness, I awoke to find nothing but an endless void of black surrounding me. 'Tis at times hard to endure.
I'll see what finding the rest of the lost melody.
You would truly offer me aid. Thank you. I believe the first sheet still roams around the town, evading all who seek it. It shan't be easy, and the Inquisition is sure to dog your every step. But know one thing for certain. If you bring me music, I can always play.
To escape Zaragoza, you must find the music sheet. Searching the sewers. Right. So there's a door opened for us. I want to hide in the barrel. Indeed. Finally, about wandering through the obligatory sewer level. It's only safest to do so from this position. myself into a bad position, haven't I? No, it's a fine position. Surprisingly. Sometimes a well-timed run does you better than hiding ever could. Particularly in times where you cannot properly confront your demons. Or in this case, someone else's, I suppose. Well, I got onto that a little bit early. So, where did you... We went up the stairs. So if you to get... Indeed, I hear you up there. So. How far do you intend to take me? The entire tour around the town, it seems. Oh. Nope. No, it was definitely too close. The one that I worry about the most. Where on earth are you taking me? about and around. Oh, okay, so it's hidden in here. Right. It was been warmest time and smiles by the touch of fingers upon the ink. Must have been very dear to someone. Right, let's return as best as we can to the guitarist. Because we have gone quite around. Let's bring us right here. It does. Wonderful.
Ah, you've returned. And by that sound of rustling paper, it seems you were able to chase down the sheet.
I was indeed.
Yes, I think I'm beginning to understand. But alas, it's just as I thought. I fear that this sheet alone is not quite enough, and I must ask you to retrieve a second.
Fair enough.
What little good news I can offer is that it should not be hard to find. The Inquisition has confiscated it. And as with all matters they deem heretical, it lies somewhere within their darkened cathedral. Of course, getting into the church district and past the many inquisitors who guard it will not be a trifling matter. Yet we may still be in luck, for I know a woman in town who may know a way to sneak you in.
Several learnings indeed.
Her name is Judith, and she often frequents me in this courtyard.
I'll go speak with her.
Good luck, my friend. Know that I appreciate all that you are doing for Zaragoza.
Right, let's figure out where this Judith is. Oh, was that you? Congratulations on being first, darling.
Those masked fools have not known peace since you arrived, grandson of Goya. You seem surprised I know of you. Zaragoza might look like she's fallen, but like a desert viper, she's alert, waiting for a chance to strike. I assume you're here for a way into the church district.
That will be correct.
A barrel wagon runs in and out of the district carrying supplies. That's your way into their domain. The melody you seek lies within a vault hidden beneath the cathedral, built to bury what those cowards cannot simply turn to ash. Once you're in the district, find the priest still true to God's cause. He'll give you the key to the graveyard, beyond which lies the vault. Yet beware, the path you take has stolen countless brave souls from Zaragoza.
Tell me about the vault.
It gives from us all that gives us hope. Glowing meadows, laughter, dance, and old friends, happy memories from a time long gone. The Goya I knew, all lost to this darkness.
I see.
Even one of the old gods met his demise there, trapped within that vault.
Oh my, an old god. Tell me about Goya.
Oh, your grandfather was a bit of a rogue back when I knew him. Even in the courts, he outwitted those with more riches than worth, painting them as hideous buffoons while convincing them it was high art. Yet roguish as he was, he felt the pain and suffering of the common folk. He wished things to be better. It's a shame what his world has become.
Farewell.
The alley to the right of the sewer entrance. That's where you will find the cart. For the sake of Zaragoza, I beseech Lady Luck to take your side this once.
To the right of the sewer entrance. So do turn around here. I misjudged your path, didn't I? Alright. It's such a wonderfully crafted sky, still. Let's wait until the cart stops, and then we can... Oh, or we can... Enforced art. Either way, it's fine. So we need to find a priest and acquire a key to the graveyard. You didn't see anything. You don't seem to know. What you, which means you are simply an obstacle. Find a way to maneuver around. What is the one path forward? Ah, the priest is already dead. So then, is this the graveyard? Suppose it looks strangely familiar. Okay, so what is a plan that leads to the church? Seems to be the temple in the distance. It's... Oh! Did not even succeed at what I was trying to do. I thought swapping the positions would be the solution, but whatever I did, it worked. So here are Goya's brighter paintings. Which was roughened by the harsh hands of the Inquisition, yet its notes remain. Well, they made that rather swift for returning. Hello there, dear guitarist.
Tell me this is no dream. Zaragoza, free at last. Oh, what I would give to see this moment, to have my eyes return for but a second. But alas, the sound of freedom will have to suffice. Very well. I believe this is where we part ways.
What can you do with my grandfather?
There are few men who could ever hope to depict beauty in the way he could. Yet it is from those to whom God gives the most that he tests the most. His affliction was a tragedy, one to which I can too wholly relate. A painter robbed of his ears, and a musician robbed of his sight. What a pair we made.
Farewell.
Good luck, and may our paths cross again.
You should mention an old god in the vault, which I did get to look around for, admittedly. That's a fair degree of red. door belongs to? I'm not too surprised. Oh. Okay, so we do not get to actually utilize the torch very long at all. We need to head... we need to dive back rather than running forward. We cannot get past. Saturn here. Indeed, the entire landscape warps around us as a result. I had a feeling he was certainly referring to when they mentioned an old god trapped in the vault, but I didn't think this was the vault anymore. Nonetheless, good way of incorporating a classic piece of art into the gameplay structure. Coming up to was probably a bad idea, nonetheless.
You've seen my sin, how I tore my own son apart. Leave now, before my temper once more gets the better of me.
Oh, we're staying?
You seek to know what happened. 'Tis what always happens, child. I grew old and weak.
Wonderful. Very proud of you, darling.
My son hovered like a vulture, waiting to pick my carcass clean. I knew I had no choice, that he would turn against me. The prophecy had sworn to me. I was so confident that it was all true. Yet even now, I hear him beg me to stop. 'Tis this cave that broke me, this never-ending solitude. Alone with my thoughts, I felt my reason turn to dust.
I'm always proud of you, my love.
Perhaps, in the end, trapped in a darkened villa, your grandfather felt the same.
What can you tell me about Goya?
This painted world was his heart. In times past, it was his hopes,
I do my best.
Now it festers with disgust at what his world had become. He saw the evils in his country and he painted them here. He felt the darkness in himself and painted me. Your grandfather is dying, Mariano. And soon these lands will fade along with him. He would have let this world stay buried, defiled by this curse. But you changed that. You found the light he lost. While he was off to play the fool, he was never blind to your many vices. Yet, as you know, he always believed in you. Walk tall, son of Goya, for I believe you have proved him right.
Once I walk away, where do we... Ah, here we are. Here's a staircase for us. And thus, ladies and gentlemen, concludes Impasto. A nice and short love letter to a classic painter. I'm not surprised by its length, myself, because I believe this is a student project. But even being a student project, it does make such a good use of employing that contrast of light and shadow, leaning more into the shadow and its dynamism. It was prevalent in even the few works of Goya that I'm familiar with offhandedly. Taking note of that distinctive elements of paint in a low poly 3D style definitely has much charm. And of course the excitement of experiencing a student work is possibility of what might come next. Especially when there is heart and passion. But this does bring this part of tonight's showcase to a close. We'll return in a bit, resuming our reading of Moby Dick. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a continued reading of Moby Dick. When last we left off, we were at sea. There was some turmoil amongst the crew. Certain people not taking too kindly to some of the natures of Captain Ahab. Chapter 39, First Night Watch. Foretop. Stab solace and mending a brace. Ha 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 ha! Clear my throat. I've been thinking over it ever since, and that ha-ha's the final consequence. Why so? Because a laugh's the wisest, easiest answer to all that's queer. And come what will, one comfort's always left. The unfailing comfort is... It's all predestinated. I heard not all his talk with Starbuck, but my poor eye Starbuck then looked something as I the other evening felt. Be sure the old mogul has fixed him too. I twigged it, knew it, had the gift, might readily have prophesied it, but when I clapped my eye upon his skull I saw it. Well, Stub, why, Stub? That's my title. Well, Stub, what of it, Stub? Here's a carcass. I know not all that may be coming, but be it what it will, I'll go to it laughing. Still waggish leerings lurks in all your horribles. I feel funny. Fala lira skira. What's my juicy little pair at home doing now? Crying its eyes out? Giving a party to the last arrived harpooneers? I dare say gay is a frigate's pennant. So am I. Fala lira skira. Oh, and drink tonight with hearts as light to love as gay and fleeting as bubbles that swim on the beaker's brim and break on the lips while meeting. A brave stave that... Who calls? Mr. Starbuck? Aye, aye, sir. He's my superior. He has his too, if I'm not mistaken. Aye, aye, sir. Just through with his job. Coming. Harpooneers and sailors. Foresail rises and discovers the watch, standing, lounging, leaning and lying in various attitudes, all singing in chorus. Farewell and adieu to you, Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu to you, ladies of Spain. Our captain's commanded... First Nantucket sailor, oh boys, don't be sentimental. It's bad for the digestion. Take a tonic. Follow me. Sings and will follow. Our captain stored upon the deck, a spyglass in his hand, a viewing of those gallant whales that blew at every strand. Oh, your tubs and your boats, my boys, and by your braces stand, and we'll have one of those fine whales, hand, boys, overhand. So be cheery, my lads, may your hearts never fail, while the bold harpooner is striking the whale. Mate's voice from the quarter deck. 8 bells there, forward. Second Nantucket sailor, avast the chorus. 8 bells there, d'ye hear, bell boy? Strike the bell 8, thou pip, thou blackling, and let me call the watch. I've the sort of mouth for that, the hogshead mouth, so, thrusts his head down the scuttle. Starbow, L-E-E-N's, L-E-E-N-S. What is starbow? What? Is this elongating it? Of course you're elongating it. Starbow leans, ahoy! 8 bells there below, tumble up! Dutch sailor, grand snoozing tonight, matey, fat night for that. I mark this in our old mogul's wine. It's quite as deadening to some as flippening to others. We sing, they sleep, I lie down there like ground to your butts. At 'em again. There, take this copper pump and hail 'em through it. Tell 'em to avast, dreaming of their lasses. Tell 'em it's the resurrection. They must kiss their last and come to judgment. That's the way. That's it. Thy throat ain't spoiled with eating Amsterdam butter. Friend sailor, hist, boys, let's have a jig or two before we ride to anchor in Blanket Bay. What say ye? There comes the other watch. Stand by all legs. Pip, little Pip. Hurrah with your tambourine. Pip, sulky and sleepy. Don't know where it is. Friend sailor, beat thy belly then and wag thy ears. Jig it, men, I say. Merry's the word. Hurrah! Damn me, won't you dance? Form now Indian file and gallop into the double shuffle. Throw yourselves. Legs! Legs! Nice and sailor. I don't like your floor, matey. It's too springy to my taste. I'm used to ice floors. I'm sorry to throw cold water on the subject, but excuse me. Maltese sailor. Me too. Where's your girls? Who but a fool would take his left hand by his right and say to himself, how do you do? Partners. I must have partners. Sicilian sailor. Aye, girls in a green, then I'll hop with ye. Yea, turn grasshopper. Long Island sailor, well, ye sulkies, there's plenty more of us. Ho corn when you may, say I. All legs go to harvest soon. Ah, here comes the music, now for it. Azure sailor, ascending and pitching the tambourine at the scuttle. Here you are, Pip. There's the windlass bits, up you mount. Now, boys, the half of them dance the tambourine. Some go below, some sleep or lie among the coils of rigging. Oh, there's a plenty. Go it, Pip. Bang it, bellboy. Rig it, dig it, stig it, quig it, bellboy. Make fireflies, break the jinglers. Jinglers, you say? There was another dropped off. I pound it so. China sailor, rattle thy teeth then and pound away. Make up a goater of thyself. French sailor, merry mad, hold up thy hoop, Pip, till I jump through it. Split jibs, tear yourselves. Tashtigo, quietly smoking. That's a white man, he calls that fun. I save my sweat. Old Manx sailor, I wonder whether those jolly lads but think them of what they are dancing over. I'll dance over your grave, I will. That's the bitterest threat of your night women. That beat head winds round corners. Oh Christ, to think of the green navies and the green-skulled crews. Well, belike the whole world's ball, as you scholars have it, and so 'tis right to make one ballroom of it. Dance on, lads. You're young. I was once. Third Nantucket sailor. Spell no. Ooh, this is worse than pulling after whales in a calm. Give us a whiff, Dash. They cease dancing and gather in clusters. Meantime the sky darkens. The wind rises. Alaska sailor. By Brahma, boys, it'll be dark sail soon. The sky-born high-tide Ganges turn to wind. Thou showest thy black brow, Siva. Maltese sailor, reclining and shaking his cap. It's the waves. The snow's caps turn to jig it now. They'll shake their tassels soon. Now would all the waves were women, then I'd go drown, and chassis with them evermore. There's naught so sweet on earth, heaven may not match it, as those swift glances of warm, wild bosoms in the dance, when the over-arbouring arms hide such ripe, bursting grapes. Sicilian sailor reclining. Tell me not of it. Hark ye, lad, fleet interlacings of the limbs, lithe swayings, coyings, flutterings, lip, heart, hip, all graze, unceasing touch and go, not taste, observe ye, else come satiety. Eh, pagan? Nudging. Tahitian sailor, reclining on a mat. Hail, holy nakedness of our dancing girls, the Hiva Hiva. Ah, low-veiled, high-pond Tahiti. I still rest me on thy mat, but the soft skin has slid. I saw thee woven in the wool to my mat, green the first day I brought thee thence, now worn and wilted quite. Ah me, not thou nor I can bear the change. How then, if so transplanted to yon sky, hear I the roaring streams from Pirahites, speak of spears, when they leap down the crags and down the villages. The blast, up spine and meet it, leaping to his feet. Portuguese sailor, how the sea rolls swashing against the tide. Stand by for reefing, hearties, the winds are just crossing swords. Pell-mell they'll go lunging presently. Danish sailor, crack, old ship, so long as thou crackest, thou holdest. Well done. The mate there holds you to it stiffly. He's no more afraid than the Isle fort at Kattegat, brought there to fight the Baltic with storm-lashed guns on which the sea salt cakes. Fourth Nantucket sailor, he has his orders, mind you that. I heard old Ahab telling he must always kill a squall, something as they burst a waterspout with a pistol. Fire your ship right into it. English sailor. But that old man's a grand old cove. We are the lads to hunt him up his whale. All. Aye, aye. The old Manx sailor, how the 3 pines shake. Pines are the hardest sort of tree to live when shifted to any other soil. But here there's none but the crew's cursed clay. Steady, helmsman, steady. It's the sort of weather when brave hearts snap ashore and keeled hulls split at sea. Oh, Captain House's birthmark, look yonder, boys. There's another in the sky, lurid like, you see, all else pitch black. Doug, what of that? All's afraid of black's afraid of me, and quarried out of it. Spanish sailor, you must bully, huh? The old grudge makes me touchy. Aye, harpooner, thy race is the undeniable dark side of mankind. Devilish dark at that. No offence. Dago, grimly. None. St. Jago Scaler, that Spaniard's mad or drunk. That can be, or else in his one case our old Mogul's fire waters are somewhat long in working. 5th Nantucket sailor, what's that I saw? Lightning? Yes. Spanish sailor, no. Dago showing his teeth. Dago spring, swallow thine, mannequin. White skin, white liver. Spanish sailor meet again. Knife thee heartily. Big frame, small spirit. All. Orow! 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 Tash to go with a whiff. Orow, allow, and orow aloft. Golds and men, both brawlers. Belfast sailor, orow! Orow, orow! The Virgin be blessed, orow! Plunge in with ye! English sailor, fair play! Snatch the Spaniard's knife! A ring! A ring! Old Manx sailor, ready formed. There, the ring at horizon. In that ring, Cain struck Abel. Sweet work, right work. No? Why then, God, madst thou the ring? Mate's voice from the quarterdeck. Hands by the halyards, in top gallant sails, stand by to reef topsails. Or the squall, jump, my jollies, as they scatter. And Pip, shrinking under the windlass. Jollies, Lord help such jollies. Crish, crash, there goes the jibstay. Blang, wang. God, duck lower, Pip. Here comes the royal yard. It's worse than being in the world once, the last day of the year. Who would go climbing after chestnuts now? But there they go, all cursing, and here I don't. Fine prospects to 'em, and they're on the road to heaven. Hold on hard. Jiminy, what a squall. But those champs there are worse yet. They are your white squalls, they. White squalls, white whale, sheer, sheer. Here have I heard all their chat just now in the white whale. Sheer, sheer. But spoken of once, and only this evening it makes me jingle all over like my tambourine. That anaconda of an old man swore him in to hunt him. Oh, thou big white god aloft there, somewhere in yon darkness, have mercy on this small black boy down here. Preserve him from all men that have no bowels to feel fear. I, Ishmael, was one of that crew. My shouts had gone up with the rest. My oath had been welded with theirs, and stronger I shouted, and more did I hammer and clench my oath, because of the dread in my soul. A wild, mystical, sympathetical feeling was in me. Ahab's quenchless field seemed mine. With greedy ears I learned the history of that murderous monster against whom I and all the others had taken our oaths of violence and revenge. For some time past, though at intervals only, the unaccompanied, secluded white whale had haunted those uncivilized seas mostly frequented by the sperm whale fishermen. But not all of them knew of his existence. Only a few of them, comparatively, had knowingly seen him, while the number who as yet had actually and knowingly given battle to him was small indeed. For owing to the large number of whale cruisers, the disorderly way they were sprinkled over the entire watery circumference, many of them adventurously pushing their quest along solitary latitudes so as seldom or never for a whole 12-month or more on a stretch, to encounter a single news-telling sail of any sort. The inordinate length of each separate voyage, the irregularity of the times of sailing from home, all these, with other circumstances, direct and indirect, long obstructed the spread through the whole worldwide whaling fleet of the special individualizing tidings concerning Moby Dick. It was hardly to be doubted that several vessels reported to have encountered at such or such a time, or on such or such a meridian, a sperm whale of uncommon magnitude and malignity, which whale, after doing great mischief to his assailants, had completely escaped them. To some minds it was not an unfair presumption. I say that the whale in question must have been no other than Moby Dick. Yet as of late, the sperm whale fishery had been marked by various and not unfrequent instances of great ferocity, cunning, and malice in the monster attacked. Therefore it was that those who by accident ignorantly gave battle to Moby Dick, such hunters, perhaps, for the most part, were content to ascribe the peculiar terror he bred, more, as it were, to the perils of the sperm whale fishery at large, than to the individual cause. In that way, mostly, the disastrous encounter between Ahab and the whale had hitherto been popularly regarded. And as for those who, previously bearing the white whale, by chance caught sight of him, in the beginning of the thing they had every one of them almost as boldly and fearlessly lowered for him as for any other whale of that species. But at length such calamities did ensue in these assaults, not restricted to sprained wrists and ankles, broken limbs, or devouring amputations, but fatal to the last degree of fatality. Those repeated disastrous repulses, all accumulating and piling their terrors upon Moby Dick. Those things had gone far to shake the fortitude of many brave hunters, to whom the story of the white whale had eventually come. Nor did wild rumours of all sorts fail to exaggerate and still the more horrify the true histories of these deadly encounters. For not only do fabulous rumours naturally grow out of the very body of all surprising, terrible events. As the smitten tree gives birth to its fungi, but in maritime life, far more than in that of terra firma, wild rumours abound, whether there is any adequate reality for them to cling to. And as the sea surpasses the land in this matter, so the whale fishery surpasses every other sort of maritime life, in the wonderfulness and fearfulness of the rumours which sometimes circulate there. Well, not only are the whalemen as a body unexempt from that ignorance and superstitiousness hereditary to all sailors, but of all sailors they are by all odds the most directly brought into contact with whatever is appallingly astonishing in the sea. Face to face, they not only eye its greatest marvels, but, hand to jaw, give battle to them. Alone in such remotest waters, that though you sailed 1,000 miles and passed 1,000 shores, you would not come to any chiselled hearthstone or aught hospitable beneath that part of the sun in such latitudes and longitudes. Pursuing through such a calling as he does, the whaleman is wrapped by influences, all tending to make his fancy pregnant with many a mighty birth. No wonder, then, that ever-gathering volume from the mere transit over the widest watery spaces, the outblown rumours of the white whale did, in the end, incorporate with themselves all manner of morbid hints, and half-formed fetal suggestions of supernatural agencies, which eventually invested Moby Dick with new terrors unborrowed from anything that visibly appears, so that in many cases such a panic did he finally strike, that few who by those rumours at least had heard of the white whale, few of those hunters were willing to encounter the perils of his jaw. But there were still other and more vital practical influences at work. Not even at the present day has the original prestige of the sperm whale, as fearfully distinguished from all other species of leviathan, died out of the minds of the whalemen as a body. There are those this day among them who, though intelligent and courageous enough in offering battle to the Greenland or right whale, would perhaps, either from professional experience or incompetency or timidity, decline a contest with the sperm whale. At any rate, there are plenty of whalemen, especially among those whaling nations not sailing under the American flag, who have never hostilely encountered the sperm whale, but whose sole knowledge of the Leviathan is restricted to the ignoble monster primitively pursued in the north. Seated on their hatches, these men will hearken with a childish fireside interest nor to the wild, strange tales of southern whaling. Nor is the preeminent tremendousness of the great sperm whale anywhere more feelingly comprehended than on board of those prows which stem him. And as if the now tested reality of his might had in former legendary times thrown its shadow before it, we find some book naturalists, Olesen and Povelson, declaring the sperm whale not only to be a consternation to every other creature in the sea, but also to be so incredibly ferocious as continually to be athirst for human blood. Nor even down to so late a time as Cuvier's were these or almost similar impressions effaced, for in his natural history the Baron himself affirms that at sight of the sperm whale all fish, sharks included, are, quote, struck with the most lively terrors and often in the precipitancy of their flight dash themselves against the rocks with such violence as to cause instantaneous death. And however the general experiences in the fishery may amend such reports as these, yet in their full terribleness, even to the bloodthirsty item of Povelson, the superstitious belief in them is, in some vicissitudes of their vocation, revived in the minds of the hunters. So that, overawed by the rumour's importance concerning him, not a few of the fishermen recalled, in reference to Moby Dick, the earlier days of the sperm whale fishery, when it was oftentimes hard to induce long practised right whalemen to embark in the perils of this new and daring warfare, such men protesting that although other leviathans might be hopefully pursued, yet to chase and point lands at such an apparition as the sperm whale was not for mortal man. But to attempt it would be inevitably to be torn into a quick eternity. On this head, there are some remarkable documents that may be consulted. Nevertheless, some there were who even in the face of these things were ready to give chase to Moby Dick, and a still greater number who, chancing only to fear of him distantly and vaguely, without the specific details of any certain calamity and without superstitious accompaniments, were sufficiently hardy not to flee from the battle if offered. One of the wild suggestions referred to as at last coming to be linked with the white whale in the minds of the superstitiously inclined was the unearthly conceit that Moby Dick was ubiquitous. He had actually been encountered at opposite latitudes at one and the same instant of time. Nor, credulous as such minds must have been, was its conceit altogether without some faint show of superstitious probability. For as the secrets of the currents and the seas have never yet been divulged, even to the most erudite research, so the hidden ways of sperm whale when beneath the surface remain, in great parts unaccountable to its pursuers, and from time to time have originated the most curious and contradictory speculations regarding them, especially concerning the mystic modes whereby, after sounding to a great depth, he transports himself with such vast swiftness to the most widely distant points. It is a thing well known to both American and English whale ships, and as well a thing placed upon authoritative record years ago by Scoresby, that some whales have been captured far north in the Pacific, in whose bodies have been found the barbs of harpoons darted in the Greenland seas, nor is it to be gainsaid that in some of these instances it has been declared that the interval of time between the two assaults could not have exceeded very many days. Hence, by inference, it has been believed by some whalemen that the Norway's Passage, so long a problem to man, was never a problem to the whale. So that here, in the real living experience of living men, the prodigies related in old times of the inland Strello mountain in Portugal, near whose top there was said to be a lake in which the wrecks of ships floated up to the surface, and that still more wonderful story of the Arethusa fountain near Syracuse, whales, whose waters were believed to have come from the Holy Land by an underground passage. These fabulous narrations are almost fully equalled by the realities of the whalemen. Forced into familiarity, then, with such prodigies as these, and knowing that after repeated, intrepid assaults, the white whale had escaped alive, it cannot be much matter of surprise that some whalemen should go still further in their superstitions, declaring Moby Dick not only ubiquitous, but immortal, for immortality is but ubiquity in time, that though groves of spears should be planted in his flanks, he would still swim away unharmed, or if indeed he should ever be made to spout thick blood, such a sight would be but a ghastly deception. Or again, in unensanguined billows hundreds of leagues away, his unsullied jet would once more be seen. But even stripped of these supernatural surmisings, there was enough in the earthly make and incontestable character of the monster to strike the imagination with unwonted power. It was not so much his uncommon bulk that much distinguished him from other sperm whales, but as was elsewhere thrown out, a peculiar snow-white wrinkled forehead, and a high pyramidical white hump. These were his prominent features, the tokens whereby, even in the limitless, uncharted seas, he revealed his identity at a long distance to those who knew him. The rest of his body was so streaked and spotted and marbled with the same shrouded hue that, in the end, he had gained his distinctive appellation of the white whale, a name indeed literally justified by his vivid aspect, when seen gliding at high noon through a dark blue sea, leaving a Milky Way wake of creamy foam all spangled with golden gleamings. Nor was it his unwonted magnitude, nor his remarkable hue, nor yet his deformed lower jaw, that so much invested the whale with natural terror, as that unexampled, intelligent malignity, which, according to specific accounts, he had over and over again evinced in his assaults. More than all, his treacherous retreat struck more of dismay than perhaps aught else, for when swimming before his exultant pursuers with every apparent symptom of alarm, he had several times been known to turn round suddenly and, bearing down upon them, either stave their boats to splinters, or drive them back in consternation to their ship. Already several fatalities had attended his chase, but though similar disasters, however little rooted ashore, were by no means unusual in the fishery. Yet in most instances such seemed the white whale's infernal forethought of ferocity, that every dismembering or death that he caused was not wholly regarded as having been inflicted by an unintelligent agent. Judge, then, to what pitches of inflamed, distracted fury the minds of his more desperate hunters were impelled, when amid the chips of chewed boats and the sinking limbs of torn comrades, they swam out of the white curves of the whale's direful wrath into the serene, exasperating sunlight that smiled on, as if at a birth or a bridal. His 3 boats stove around him, and oars and men both whirling in the eddies. One captain, seizing the line-knife from his broken prow, had dashed at the whale, as an Arkansas duelist at his foe, blindly seeking with a 6-inch blade to reach the fathom-deep life of the whale. That captain was Ahab, and then it was that, suddenly sweeping his sickle-shaped lower jaw beneath him, Moby Dick had reaped away Ahab's leg, as a mower a blade of grass in the field. No turbaned Turk, no hired Venetian or Malay could have smote him with more seeming malice. Small reason was there to doubt, then, that ever since that almost fatal encounter Ahab had cherished a wild vindictiveness against the whale. All the more fell for that in his frantic morbidness he at last came to identify with him. Not only all his bodily woes, but all his intellectual and spiritual exasperations. The white whale swam before him as the monomaniac incarnation of all those malicious agencies which some deep men feel eating in them, till they are left living on with half a heart and half a lung. That intangible malignity which has been from the beginning, to whose dominion even the modern Christians ascribe one half of the worlds, which the ancient Ophites of the East reverenced in their statue devil. Ahab did not fall down and worship it like them, but deliriously transferring its idea to the abhorred white whale, he pitted himself, all mutilated against it. All that most maddens and torments, all that stirs up the lees of things, all truth with malice in it, all that cracks the sinews and cakes the brain, all that cracks the sinews and cakes the brain, all the subtle demonisms of life and thought, all evil to crazy Ahab, were visibly personified and made practically assailable in Moby Dick. He piled upon the whale's white hump the sum of all the general rage and hate felt by his whole race from Adam down, and then, as if his chest had been a mortar, he burst his hot heart's shell upon it. It is not probable that this monomania in him took its instant rise at the precise time of his bodily dismemberment. Then, in darting at the monster, knife in hand, he had but given loose to a sudden, passionate, corporal animosity, and when he received the stroke that tore him, he probably but felt the agonizing bodily laceration, but nothing more. Yet when his collision forced to turn towards home, and for long months of days and weeks, Ahab and Anguish lay stretched together in one hammock, rounding in midwinter that dreary, howling Patagonian cape. Then it was that his torn body and gashed soul bled into one another, and so interfusing made him mad. That it was only then, on the homeward voyage, after the encounter, that the final monomania seized him, seems all but certain from the fact that, at intervals during the passage, he was a raving lunatic, and, though unlimbed of a leg, yet such vital strength yet lurked in his Egyptian chest, and was moreover intensified by his delirium, that his mates were forced to lace him fast. Even there, as he sailed, raving in his hammock, in a straitjacket, he swung to the mad rockings of the gales, and when running into more sufferable latitudes, the ship, with mired stun sails spread, floated across the tranquil tropics, and to all appearances the old man's delirium seemed left behind him with the Cape Horn swells, and he came forth from his dark den to the blessed light and air. Even then, when he bore that firm, collected front, however pale, and issued his calm orders once again, and his mates thanked God the direful malice was now gone, even then Ahab in his hidden self raved on. Human madness is oftentimes a cunning and most feline thing. When you think it fled, it may have but become transfigured into some still subtler form. Ahab's full lunacy subsided not, but deepeningly contracted, and the unabated Hudson from that noble Northman flows narrowly but unfathomably through the Highland Gorge. But, as in his narrow-flowing monomania, not one jot of Ahab's broad madness had been left behind, so in that broad madness not one jot of his great natural intellect had perished. The before living agent now became the living instrument. If such a furious trope may stand, his special lunacy stormed his general sanity and carried it, and turned all its concentrated cannon upon its own mad mark, so that far from having lost his strength, Ahab, to that one end, did not possess 1,000-fold more potency than he ever had sanely brought to bear upon any one reasonable subject. This is much, yet Ahab's larger, darker, deeper part remains unhinted. But vain to popularize profundities, yet all truth is profound, winding far down from within the very heart of this spiked Hotel de Cluny, where we here stand, however grand and wonderful, now quit it, and take your way, ye nobler, sadder souls, to those vast Roman halls of Thermes, where far beneath the fantastic towers of man's upper earth, his root of grandeur, his whole awful essence sits in bearded state, an antique buried beneath antiquities, enthroned on torsos. So with a broken throne the great gods mock that captive king. So like a caryatid he patient sits, upholding on his frozen brow the piled entablatures of ages. Wind ye down there, ye prouder, sadder souls, question that proud, sad king. A family likeness, I did beget ye young exiled royalties, and from your grim sire only will this old state secret come. Now in his heart Ahab had some glimpse of this, namely, All my means are sane, my motive and my object mad. Yet without power to kill, or change, or shun the fact, he likewise knew that to mankind he did long dissemble, in some sort did still. But that thing of his dissembling was only subject to his perceptibility, not to his will determine it. Nevertheless, so well did he succeed in that dissembling, that when with ivory leg he stepped ashore at last, no Nantucketer thought him otherwise than but naturally grieved, and that to the quick, with terrible casualty which had overtaken him. The report of his undeniable delirium at sea was likewise popularly ascribed to a kindred cause, and so to all the added moodiness which always afterwards, to the very day of sailing in the Pequod, in the present voyage, sat brooding on his brow. Nor is it so very unlikely that far from distrusting his fitness for another whaling voyage, on account of such dark symptoms, the calculating people of that prudent ire were inclined to harbour the conceit that for those very reasons he was all the better qualified and set on edge for a pursuit so full of rage and wildness as the bloody hunt of whales, gnawed within and scorched without, with the infixed unrelenting fangs of some incurable idea. Such an one, could he be found, would seem the very man to dart his iron and lift his lance against the most appalling of all brutes, or, if for any reason thought to be corporeally incapacitated for that, yet such an one would seem superlatively competent to cheer and howl on his underlings to the attack. Be all this as it may, certain it is that with the mad secret of his unabated rage bolted up and keyed in him, Ahab had purposely sailed upon the present voyage with the one only and all engrossing subject of hunting, the white whale. Had any one of his old acquaintances on shore but half dreamed of what was lurking in him then, how soon would their aghast and righteous souls have wrenched the ship from such a fiendish man? They were bent on profitable cruises, the profit to be counted down in dollars from the mint. He was intent on audacious, immitigable, and supernatural revenge. Here then was this grey-headed, ungodly old man, chasing with curses a Job's whale round the world, and at the head of a crew too chiefly made up of mongrel renegades and castaways and cannibals, morally enfeebled also by the incompetence of mere unaided virtue or right-mindedness in Starbuck, the invulnerable jollity of indifference and recklessness in Stubb, and the pervading mediocrity in Flask. Such a crew, so officered, seemed specially picked and packed by some infernal fatality to help him to his monomaniac revenge. How it was that they so aboundingly responded to the old man's ire, by what evil magic their souls were possessed that at times his hate seemed almost theirs, the white whale as much their insufferable foe as his. How all this came to be, what the white whale was to them, or how to their unconscious understandings also in some dim, unsuspected way he might have seemed the gliding great demon of the seas of life. All this to explain, be to dive deeper than Ishmael can go. The subterranean miner that works in us all, how can one tell whither leans his shaft by the ever-shifting, muffled sound of his pick? Who does not feel the irresistible arm drag? What skiff in tow of a 74 can stand still? For one, I gave myself up to the abandonment of the time and the place. But while yet all arush to encounter the whale, could see naught in that brute, the deadliest ill. What the white whale was to Wahab has been hinted. What, at times, he was to me, as yet remains unsaid. Aside from those more obvious considerations touching Moby Dick, which could not but occasionally awaken in any man's soul some alarm, there was another thought, or rather vague, nameless horror concerning him, which at times, by its intensity, completely overpowered all the rest, and yet so mystical and well nigh ineffable was it, that I almost despair of putting it in a comprehensible form. It was the whiteness of the whale that above all else appalled me. But how can I hope to explain myself here, and yet, in some dim, random way, explain myself I must, and as all these chapters might be not. Though in many natural objects, whiteness refiningly enhances beauty as if imparting some special virtue of its own, as in marbles, japonicas, and pearls, and though various natures have in some way recognized a certain royal preeminence in this hue, even the barbaric grand old kings of Pegu placing the title Lord of the White Elephants above all their other magniloquent descriptions of dominion, and the modern kings of Siam unfurling the same snow-white quadruped in the royal standard, and the Hanoverian flag bearing the one figure of a snow-white charger, and the great Austrian Empire, Caesarian, heir to the overlording Rome, having for the imperial colour the same imperial hue, and though this preeminence in it applies to the human race itself, giving the white man ideal mastership over every dusky tribe, and though besides all this whiteness has been made significant of gladness, for among the Romans a white stone marked a joyful day, and though in other mortal sympathies and symbolizings this same hue was made the emblem of many touching noble things, the innocence of pride, the benignity of age, though among the red men of America the giving of the white belt of wampum was the deepest pledge of honor, though in many climes whiteness typifies the majesty of justice, and the ermine of the judge attributes the daily state of kings and queens drawn by milk-white steeds, and though even in the higher mysteries of the most august religions has been made the symbol of the divine spotlessness and power by the Persian fire worshippers, the white forked flame being held the holiest on the altar, and in the Greek mythologies, the great Jove himself being made incarnate in a snow-white bowl. And though to the noble Iroquois, the midwinter sacrifice of the sacred white dawn was by far the holiest festival of their theology, that spotless, faithful creature being held the purest envoy they could send to the Great Spirit, with the annual tidings of their own fidelity. And though directly from the Latin word for white, all Christian priests derive the name of one part of their sacred vesture, the alb or tunic, one beneath the cassock, and though among the holy pomps of the Romish faith, white is specially employed in the celebration of the Passion of our Lord, though in the vision of St. John white robes are given to the redeemed, and the 24 elders stand clothed in white before the great white throne, and the Holy One that sitteth there white like wool. Yet for all these accumulated associations with whatever is sweet and honourable and sublime, there yet lurks an elusive something in the innermost idea of this hue, which strikes more of a panic to the soul than that redness which affrights in blood. This elusive quality it is which causes the thought of whiteness when divorced from more kindly associations and coupled with any object terrible in itself to heighten that terror to the furthest bounds. Witness the white bear of the poles and the white shark of the tropics. What but their smooth, flaky whiteness makes them the transcendent horrors they are? That ghastly whiteness it is which imparts such an abhorrent mildness, even more loathsome than terrific, to the dumb gloating of their aspect, so that not the fierce faint tiger in his heraldic coat can stagger courage, as the white-shrouded bear or shark. With reference to the polar bear, it may possibly be urged by him who would fain go still deeper into this matter, that it is not the whiteness, separately regarded, which heightens the intolerable hideousness of that brute form. Analysed, that heightened hideousness, it may be said, only arises from the circumstance that the irresponsible ferociousness of the creature stands invested in the fleece of celestial innocence and love, and hence by bringing together two such opposite emotions in our mind, the polar bear frightens us with so unnatural a contrast. But even assuming all this to be true, yet, were it not for the whiteness, you would not have that intensified terror. As for the white shark, the white gliding ghostliness of repose in that creature, beheld in his ordinary moods, strangely tallies with the same quality in the polar bear and the polar quadruped. This peculiarity is most vividly hit by the French in the name they bestow upon that fish. The Romish Mass for the dead begins with Requiem Eternum, eternal rest, whence Requiem, denominating the Mass itself, and any other funeral music, now an allusion to the white, silent stillness of death in the shark, and the mild deadliness of his habits. The French call him Requiem. Bethink thee of the albatross, whence come those clouds of spiritual wonderment and pale dread, in which that white phantom sails in all imaginations. Not Coleridge first through that spell, but God's great unflattering laureate, nature. I remember the first albatross I ever saw. It was during a prolonged gale and waters hard upon the Antarctic seas. For my forenoon watch below, I ascended to the overclouded deck, and there, dashed upon the main hatches, I saw a real, feathery thing of unspotted whiteness, and with a hooked Roman bill sublime. At intervals it arched forth its vast archangel wings as if to embrace some holy ark. Wondrous flutterings and throbbings shook it. Though bodily unharmed, it uttered cries as some king's ghost in supernatural distress. Though its inexpressible, strange eyes, methought I peeped a secret which took hold of God. As Abraham before the angels, I bowed myself. The white thing was so white, its wings so wide, and in those forever exiled waters I had lost the miserable warping memories of tradition and of towns. Long I gazed that prodigy of plumage. I cannot tell, can only hint, the things that darted through me then. But at last I awoke, and turning, asked a sailor what bird was this. A coney, he replied. Coney, never had heard that name before. Is it conceivable that this glorious thing is utterly unknown to men ashore? Never, but some time after I learned that coney was some seaman's name for albatross, so that by no possibility could Coleridge's wild rhyme have had aught to do with those mystical impressions which were mine when I saw that bird upon our deck. But neither had I then read the rhyme, nor knew the bird to be an albatross. Yet in saying this, I do but indirectly burnish a little brighter the noble merit of the poem and the poet. I assert, then, that in the wondrous bodily whiteness of the bird chiefly lurks the secret of the spell, a truth the more evinced by this, that by a solecism of terms there are birds called grey albatrosses, and these I have frequently seen, but never with such emotions as when I beheld the Antarctic fowl. But how had the mystic thing been caught? Whisper it not, and I will tell, with a treacherous hook and line as the fowl floated on the sea. At last the captain made a postman of it, tying a lettered leathern tally round its neck, with the ship's time and place, and then letting it escape. But I doubt not that leathern tally meant for man was taken off in heaven, when the white fowl flew to join the wing-folding, the invoking and adoring cherubim. Most famous in our Western annals and Indian traditions is that of the white steed of the prairies, a magnificent milk-white charger, large-eyed, small-headed, bluff-chested, and with the dignity of 1,000 monarchs in his lofty, unscorning carriage. He was the elected Xerxes of vast herds of wild horses, whose pastures in those days were only fenced by the Rocky Mountains and the Alleghanies. At their flaming head he westward trooped it, like the chosen star which every evening leans on the hosts of light. The flashing cascade of his mane, the curving comet of his tail, invested him with housings more resplendent than gold and silver beaters could have furnished him. A most imperial and archangelical apparition of that unfallen western world, which to the eyes of the old trappers and hunters revived the glories of those primeval times when Adam walked majestic as a god, bluff-browed and fearless as this mighty steed, whether marching amid his aides and marshals in the van of countless cohorts in that chemicals that endlessly streamed it over the plains, like an Ohio, or whether, with his circumambient subjects browsing all round at the horizon, the white steed galloping reviewed them with warm nostrils reddening through his cool milkiness in whatever aspect he presented himself. Always the bravest Indians, he was the object of trembling reverence and awe. Nor can it be questioned, from what stands on legendary record of this noble horse, that it was his spiritual whiteness chiefly which so clothed him with divineness, and that this divineness had that in it which, though commanding worship, at the same time enforced a certain nameless terror. But there are other instances where this whiteness loses all that accessory and strange glory which invests it in the white steed and albatross. What is it that in the albino man so peculiarly repels and often shocks the eye is that sometimes he is loathed by his own kith and kin? It is that whiteness which invests him, a thing expressed by the name he bears. The albino is as well made as other men, has no substantive deformity, and yet this mere aspect of all-pervading whiteness makes him more strangely hideous than the ugliest abortion. Why should this be so? Nor in quite other aspects does nature in her least palpable but not less malicious agencies fail to enlist among her forces this crowning attribute of the terrible. From its snowy aspect, the gauntleted ghost of the southern seas has been denominated the White Squall, nor in some historic instances has the art of human malice omitted so potent an auxiliary. How wildly it heightens the effect of that passage in Froissart, when massed in the snowy symbol of their faction, the desperate White Hoods of Ghent murdered their bailiff in the marketplace. Nor in some things the common hereditary experience of all mankind fail to bear witness to the supernaturalism of this hue. It cannot well be doubted that one visible quality in the aspect of the dead which most appalls the gazer is their marble pallor lingering there, as if indeed that pallor were as much like the badge of consternation in the other world as of mortal trepidation here. And from that pallor of the dead we borrow the expressive hue of the shroud in which we wrap them. Nor even our superstitions we fail to throw the same snowy mantle around our phantoms, all ghosts rising in a milk-white fog. Yea, while these terrors seize us, let us add that even the King of Terrors, personified by the evangelist, rides on his pallid horse. Therefore, in his other moods, symbolize whatever grand or gracious thing he will by whiteness. No man can deny that in its profoundest idealized significance it calls up a peculiar apparition to the soul. But though without dissent this point be fixed, how is mortal man to account for it? To analyze it would seem impossible. Can we, then, by the citation of some of those instances wherein this thing of whiteness, though for the time whether wholly or in great part stripped of all direct associations calculated to impart to it aught fearful, but nevertheless is found to exert over us the same sorcery, or modified, can we thus hope to light upon some chance clue to conduct us to the hidden cause we seek? Let us try, but in a matter like this, subtlety appeals to subtlety, and without imagination no man can follow another into these halls, and though, doubtless, some at least of the imaginative expressions but presented may have been shared by most men, yet few perhaps were entirely conscious of them at the time, therefore may not be able to recall them now. Why to the man of untutored ideality, who happens to be but loosely acquainted with the peculiar character of the day, does the bare mention of Whitsuntide marshal in the fancy such long, dreary, speechless processions of slow-pacing pilgrims, downcast and hooded with new-fallen snow? Or to the unread, unsophisticated Protestant of the Middle American states, why does the passing mention of a white friar or a white nun evoke such an eyeless statue in the soul? Or what is there apart from the traditions of dungeoned warriors and kings, which will not wholly account for it, that makes the White Tower of London tell so much more strongly on the imagination of an untravelled American than those other storied structure, its neighbours, the Byward Tower, even the Bloody, and those sublimer towers, the White Mountains of New Hampshire, whence, in peculiar moons, comes that gigantic ghostliness over the soul of the bare mention of that name, while the thought of Virginia's Blue Ridge is full of a soft, dewy, distant dreaminess. Or why, irrespective of all latitudes and longitudes, the name of the White Sea exerts such a spectralness over the fancy, while that of the Yellow Sea lulls us with mortal thoughts of long, lacquered, mild afternoons on the waves, followed by the gaudiest and yet sleepiest of sunsets. Or to choose a wholly unsubstantial instance, perhaps addressed to the fancy, why, in reading the old fairy tales of Central Europe, does the tall pale man with the heart's forests, whose changeless pallor unrustlingly glances through the green of the groves, why is this phantom more terrible than all the whooping imps of the Blocksberg? Nor is it altogether the remembrance of her cathedral toppling earthquakes, nor the stampedos of her frantic seas, nor the tearlessness of arid skies that never rain, nor is the sight of her wide field of leaning spires, wrenched copestones, and crosses all adroop, like canted yards of anchored fleets, and her suburban avenues of households lying over upon each other as a tossed pack of cards. It's not these things alone which make tearless Lima the strangest, saddest city thou canst see, for Lima has taken the white veil, and there is a higher horror in this whiteness of her woe. Old as Pizarro, this whiteness keeps her ruins forever new, admits not the cheerful greenness of complete decay, spreads over her broken ramparts the rigid pallor of an apoplexy that fixes on its own distortions. I know that, to the common apprehension, this phenomenon of whiteness is not confessed to be the prime agent in exaggerating the terror of objects otherwise terrible, nor to the unimaginative mind is there aught of terror in these appearances, whose awfulness to another mind almost solely consists in this one phenomenon, especially when exhibited under any form at all approaching to muteness or universality. What I mean with these statements may perhaps be respectively elucidated by the following examples. First, the mariner, when drawing nigh the coasts of foreign lands, if by night he hear the roar of breakers, starts to vigilance, and feels just enough of trepidation to sharpen all his faculties, but under precisely similar circumstances, let him be called from his hammock to view his ship sailing through a midnight sea of milky whiteness, as if from encircling headlands shoals of combed white bears were swimming round him, then he feels a silent, superstitious dread. The shrouded phantom of the whitened waters is horrible to him as a real ghost. In vain the lead assures him he is still off soundings, heart and helm they both go down. He never rests, still blue water is under him again. Yet whereas the mariner who will tell thee, sir, it was not much the fear of striking hidden rocks, as the fear of that hideous whiteness that so stirred me. Second, the native Indian of Peru, that continual sight of the snow-houted Andes conveys naught of dread, except perhaps in the mere fancying of the eternal frosted desolateness reigning at such vast altitudes, and the natural conceit of what a fearfulness it would be to lose oneself in such inhuman solitudes. Much the same is it with the backwoodsman of the West, who with comparative indifference views an unbounded prairie sheeted with driven snow, no shadow of tree or twig to break the fixed trance of whiteness. Not so the sailor beholding the scenery of the Antarctic seas, where at times, by some infernal trick of legerdemain in the powers of frost and air, he, shivering and half shipwrecked, instead of rainbows speaking hope and solace to his misery, views what seems a boundless churchyard grinning upon him, with its lean ice monuments and splintered crosses. But thou sayest, methinks, that white-led chapter about whiteness is but a white flag hung out from the craven soul. Thou surrenderest to a hypo, Ishmael. Tell me, why this strong young cult, foaled in some peaceful valley of Vermont, far removed from all beasts of prey, why is it that upon the sunniest day, if you but shake a fresh buffalo robe behind him, so that he cannot even see it, but only smells its wild animal muskiness, why will he start, snort, and with bursting eyes paw the ground in frenzies of affright? There was no remembrance in him of any gorings of wild creatures in his green northern home, so that the strange muskiness he smells cannot recall to him anything associated with the experience of former perils. For what knows he, this New England cult, of the black bisons of distant Oregon, No, but here thou beholdest, even in a dumb brute, the instinct of the knowledge of the demons in the world. Though thousands of miles from Orient, still when he smells that savage musk, the rending, goring bison herds are as present to the deserted wild fold of the prairies, which this instant they may be trampling into dust. Thus, then, the muffled rollings of the milky sea, the bleak rustlings, the festooned frosts of mountains, the desolate shiftings of the wind-rolled snows of prairies, all these, to Ishmael, are as the shaking of that buffalo-robe to the frightened cult. Though neither knows where lie the nameless things of which the mystic sign gives forth such hints, yet with me, as with the cult, somewhere those things must exist. Though in many of its aspects this visible world seems formed in love, the invisible spheres were formed in fright. But not yet have we solved the incantation of this whiteness, and learned why it appeals with its power to the soul, and more strange and far more portentous, why, as we have seen, it is at once the most meaning symbol of spiritual things, nay, the very veil of Christian's deity, and yet should be as it is, the intensifying agent in things the most appalling to mankind. Is it that by its indefiniteness it shadows forth the heartless voids and immensities of the universe, and thus stabs us from behind with the thought of annihilation when beholding the white depths of the Milky Way? Or is it that as in essence whiteness is not so much a colour as the visible absence of colour, and at the same time the concrete of all colours? Is it for these reasons that there is such a dumb blankness, full of meaning, in a white landscape of snows, a colourless, all colour of atheism from which we shrink? And when we consider that other theory of the natural philosophers, that all other earthly hues, very stately or lovely and blazoning, the sweet tinges of sunset skies and woods, yea, the gilded velvets of butterflies, and the butterfly cheeks of young girls, all these are but subtle deceits, not actually inherent in substances, but only laid on from without, so that all deified nature absolutely paints, like the harlot, whose allurements cover nothing but the charnel house within. And when we proceed further, and consider that the mystical cosmetic which produces every one of the hues, the great principle of light, forever remains white or colourless in itself, as if operating without medium or upon matter, will touch all objects, even tulips and roses, with its own blank tinge. Pondering all this, the palsied universe lies before us a leper, and like wilful travellers in Lapland who refuse to wear coloured and colouring glasses upon their eyes, so the wretched infidel gazes himself blind at the monumental white shroud that wraps all the prospect around him. And of all these things the albino whale was the symbol. Wonder ye, then, at the fiery hunt. Haste! Did you hear that noise coming on? It was the middle watch. A fair moonlight. The seamen were standing in a cordon, extending from one of the freshwater butts in the waist to the scuttle-butt near the taffrail. In this manner they passed the buckets to fill the scuttle-butt, standing, for the most part, in the hollow precincts of the quarter-deck. They were careful not to speak or rustle their feet. From hand to hand the buckets went in the deepest silence, only broken by the occasional flap of a sail, and the steady hum of the unceasingly advancing keel. It was in the midst of this repose that Archie, one of the cordon, whose post was near the after-hatches, whispered to his neighbour, Cholo, the words above. "Haste! Did you hear that noise, Kabako? Take the bucket, will you, Archie? What noise do you mean?" "There it is again, under the hatches. Don't you hear it? A cough. It sounded like a cough." "Cough be damned! Pass along the return bucket." "There again! There it is! Sounds like 2 or 3 sleepers turning over now." "Caramba, have done, shipmate, will you? It's a 3 soaked biscuit you eat for supper turning over inside of you, nothing else. Look to the bucket." Say what you will, shipmate, I've sharp ears. Ah, you are the chap, ain't you, that heard the hum of the old Quakeress's knitting needles 50 miles at sea from Nantucket? You're the chap. Grin away, we'll see what turns up. Hark ye, Kabako, there's somebody down in the afterhold that has not yet been seen on deck, and I suspect our old mogul knows something of it too. I heard Stubb tell Flask one morning watch there was something of that sort in the wind. Tish, the bucket! Had you followed Captain Ahab down into his cabin after the squall that took place on the night succeeding that wild ratification of his purpose with his crew, you would have seen him go to a locker in the transom and bring out a large wrinkled roll of yellowish sea charts. Spread them before him on his screwed-out table, then, seating himself before it, you would have seen him intently study the various lines and shadings, which there met his eye, and with slow but steady pencil trace additional courses over spaces that before were blank. At intervals he would refer to piles of old logbooks beside him, wherein were set down the seasons and places in which, on various former voyages of various ships, sperm whales had been captured or seen. While thus employed, the heavy pewter lamp suspended in chains over his head continually rocked with the motion of the ship, and forever through shifting gleams and shadows of lines upon his wrinkled brow, it almost seemed that while he himself was marking out lines and courses on the wrinkled charts, some invisible pencils also tracing lines and courses upon the deeply marked chart of his forehead. But it was not this night in particular that, in the solitude of his cabin, Ahab thus pondered over his charts. Almost every night they were brought out, almost every night some pencil marks were effaced, and others were substituted. For with the charts of all 4 oceans before him, Ahab was threading a maze of currents and eddies, with a view to the more certain accomplishment of that monomaniac thought of his soul. Now, to anyone not fully acquainted with the ways of the Leviathans, it might seem an absurdly hopeless task thus to seek out one solitary creature in the unhooked oceans of this planet, but not so did it seem to Ahab, who knew the sets of all tides and currents, and thereby calculating the driftings of the sperm whale's food, and also calling to mind the regular, ascertained seasons for hunting him in particular latitudes, could arrive at reasonable surmises, almost approaching to certainties concerning the timeliest day to be upon this or that ground in search of his prey. So short indeed is the fact concerning the periodicalness of the sperm whales resorting to given waters, that many hunters believe that, would it be closely observed and studied throughout the world, that the logs for one voyage of the entire whale fleet carefully collated, then the migrations of sperm whale would be found to correspond in invariability to those of the herring shoals or the flights of swallows. On this hint, attempts have been made to construct elaborate migratory charts of the sperm whale. Since the above was written, the statement is happily borne out by an official circular issued by Lieutenant Maury of the National Observatory, Washington, April 16, 1851. By that circular it appears that precisely such a chart is in course of completion, and portions of it are presented in the circular. This chart divides the ocean into districts of 5 degrees of latitude by 5 degrees of longitude, perpendicularly through each of which districts are 12 columns for the 12 months, and horizontally through each of which districts are 3 lines, one to show the number of days which have been spent in each month in every district, and 2 others to show the number of days in which whales, sperm or right, have been seen. Besides, when making a passage from one feeding ground to another, the sperm whales, guided by some infallible instinct, say, rather secret intelligence from the deity, mostly swim in veins, as they are called, continuing their way along a given ocean line with such undeviating exactitude that no ship ever sailed her course, by any chance, with one tide of such marvellous precision. Though, in these cases, the direction taken by any one whale be straight as a surveyor's parallel, and though the line of advance be strictly confined to his own unavoidable straight wake, the arbitrary vein in which, at these times, he is said to swim, generally embraces some few miles in width, more or less as the vein is presumed to expand or contract, but never exceeds the visual sweep from the whale ship's mastheads, when circumspectly gliding along this magic zone. The sum is that at particular seasons within that breadth and along that path, migrating whales may with great confidence be looked for. And hence not only at substantiated times, upon well-known separate feeding grounds, could Ahab hope to encounter his prey. but on crossing the widest expanses of water between those grounds he called, by his art, so place and time himself on his way, as even then not to be wholly without prospect of a meeting. There was a circumstance which at first sight seemed to entangle his delirious but still methodical scheme, but not so in the reality, perhaps. Though the gregarious sperm whales have their regular seasons for particular grounds, yet in general you cannot conclude that the herds which haunted such and such a latitude or longitude this year, say, will not be identical and the same with those that were found there the preceding season. Though there are peculiar and unquestionable instances where the contrary of this has proved true. In general, the same remark, only within a less wide limit, applies to solitaries and hermits among matured, aged sperm whales. So that though Moby Dick had in a former year been seen, for example, on what is called the Seychelles Ground in the Indian Ocean or Volcano Bay in the Japanese coast, yet it did not follow that were the Pequod to visit either of those spots at any subsequent corresponding season, she would infallibly encounter him there. So too with some other feeding grounds where he had at times revealed himself. But all these seemed only his casual stopping places and ocean inns, so to speak, not his places of prolonged abode, and where Ahab's chances of accomplishing his object have hitherto been spoken of, allusion has not been made to whatever wayside, antecedent, extra prospects for his, ere particular set time or place were attained. When all possibilities would become probabilities, and, as Ahab fondly thought, every possibility the next thing to a certainty. That particular set time and place were conjoined in the one technical phrase, the season on the line. For there and then, for several consecutive years, Moby Dick had been empirically descried, lingering in those waters for a while, as the sun, in its annual round, loiters for a predicted interval in any one sign of the zodiac. There it was, too, that most of the deadly encounters of the white men had taken place. There the waves were storied with his deeds. There also was that tragic spot, where the monomaniac old man had found the awful motive to his vengeance. But in the cautious comprehensiveness and unloitering vigilance with which Ahab threw his brooding soul into this unfaltering hunt, he would not permit himself to rest all his hopes upon the one crowning fact above mentioned, however flattering it might be to those hopes, nor in the sleeplessness of his vow could he so tranquillize his unquiet heart as to postpone all intervening quest. Now, the Pequod had sailed from Nantucket at the very beginning, the season of the line. No possible endeavour then would enable her commander to make the great passage southwards, double Cape Horn, and then running down 60 degrees of latitude arrived at the equatorial Pacific in time to cruise there. Therefore he must wait for the next ensuing season. Yet, the premature hour of Pequod's sailing had, perhaps, been correctly selected by Ahab with a view to this very complexion of things, because an interval of 365 days and nights was before him, an interval which, instead of impatiently enduring ashore, he would spend in a miscellaneous hunt. If by chance the white whale, spending his vacation in seas far remote from his empirical feeding grounds, should turn up his wrinkled brow off the Persian Gulf or in the Bengal Bay or China Seas, or any other waters haunted by his race, so that monsoons, pampas, nor'westers, harmattans, trades, any wind but the Levanter and Simoon might blow Moby Dick into the devious zigzag world circle of the Pequod's circumnavigating wake. But granting all this, yet regarded discreetly and coolly, seems it not but a mad idea, this, that in the broad boundless ocean one solitary whale, even if encountered, should be thought capable of individual recognition from his hunter, even as a white-bearded mufti in the thronged thoroughfares of Constantinople. Yes, but the peculiar snow-white-browed Moby Dick and his snow-white hump could not be unmistakable. And have I not tallied the whale? Ahab would mutter himself as after poring over his charts too long after midnight he would throw himself back in reveries. Tallied him, and shall he escape? His broad fins are bald and scalloped up like a lost sheep's ear, and here his mad mind would run on in a breathless race, till a weariness and faintness of pondering came over him, and in the open air of the deck he would seek to recover his strength. Ah, God, what trances of torments does that man endure who is consumed with one unachieved revengeful desire? He sleeps with clenched hands and wakes with his own bloody nails in his palms. often when forced from his hammock by exhausting and intolerably vivid dreams of the night, which, resuming his own intense thoughts through the day, carried them on amid a clashing of frenzies, and whirled them round and round and round in his blazing brain, till the very throbbing of his life-sport became insufferable anguish, and when, as was sometimes the case, the spiritual throes in him heaved his being up from his base, and a chasm seemed opening in him, from which forked flames and lightnings shot up, and accursed fiends beckoned him to leap down among them. When this hell in himself yawned beneath him, a wild cry would be heard through the ship. With glaring eyes, Ahab would burst from his stateroom, as though escaping from a bed that was on fire. Yet these, perhaps, instead of being the unsuppressible symptoms of some latent weakness or fright at his own resolve, were but the plainest tokens of his intensity. For at such times crazy Ahab, the scheming, unappeasedly steadfast hunter of the white whale, this Ahab that had gone to his hammock, was not the agent that so caused him to burst from it in horror again. The latter was the eternal living principle or soul in him, and in sleep, being for the time dissociated from the characterizing mind which at other times employed it for its outer vehicle or agent, it spontaneously sought escape from the scorching contiguity of the frantic thing of which, for the time, it was no longer an integral. But as the mind does not exist unless linked with the soul, therefore it must be mad, in Ahab's case, yielding up all his thoughts and fancies to his one supreme purpose. That purpose, by its own sheer inveteracy of will, forced itself against gods and devils into a kind of self-assumed, independent being of its own. Nay, it would grimly live and burn, when the common vitality to which it was conjoined fled horror-stricken from the unbeaten and unfathered birth. Therefore, the tormented spirit that glared out of bodily eyes, when what seemed Ahab rushed from his room, was, for the time, but a vacated thing, a formless, somnambulistic thing, a ray of living light to be sure, but without an object to colour, and therefore a blankness in itself. God help thee, old man, thy thoughts have created a creature in thee, and he whose intense thinking thus makes him a Prometheus. A vulture feeds upon that heart forever. That vulture, the very creature he creates. So far as what there may be of a narrative in this book, and indeed as indirectly touching one or two very interesting and curious particulars in the habits of sperm whales, the foregoing chapter in its earliest part is as important a one as when be found in this volume. But the later matter of it requires to be still further and more familiarly enlarged upon, in order to be adequately understood, and moreover to take away any incredulity what a profound ignorance of the entire subject may induce in some minds as to the natural verity of the main points in this affair. I care not to perform this part of my task methodically, but shall be content to produce the desired impression of separate citations of items practically or reliably known to me as a whaleman, and from these citations I take it the conclusion aimed at will naturally follow of itself. First, I have personally known 3 instances where a whale, after receiving a harpoon, has effected a complete escape, and, after an interval in one instance of 3 years, has been again struck by the same hand and slain. When the 2 irons, both marked by the same private cipher, have been taken from the body, in the instance where 3 years intervened between the fling of the 2 harpoons, and I think it may have been something more than that, the man who darted them, happening, in the interval, to go in a trading ship on a voyage to Africa, went ashore there, joined a discovery party and penetrated far into the interior, where he travelled for a period of nearly 2 years, often endangered by serpents, savages, tigers, poisonous miasmas, and all the other common perils incident to wandering in the heart of the unknown regions. Meanwhile, the whale he had struck must also have been on its travels. No doubt it had thrice circumnavigated the globe, brushing with its flanks all the coasts of Africa, but to no purpose. This man and this whale again came together, and the one vanquished the other. I myself, have known 3 instances similar to this, and that it is in 2 of them I saw the whale struck, and upon the second attack saw the 2 irons with the respective marks cut in them, afterwards taken from the dead fish. In the 3 other instances it so fell out that I was in the boat both times. First and the last time distinctly recognised a peculiar sort of huge mole under the whale's eye, which I had observed there 3 years previous. I say 3 years, but I'm pretty sure it was more than that. Here are 3 instances, then, which I personally know the truth of, but I have heard of many other instances from persons whose veracity in the matter there is no good ground to impeach. Secondly, it is well known in the sperm whale fishery, however ignorant the world ashore may be of it, that there have been several memorable historical instances where a particular whale in the ocean has been at distant times and places popularly cognizable. Why such a whale became thus marked was not altogether and originally owing to his bodily peculiarities, as distinguished from other whales, for, how peculiar in that respect any chance whale may be, they soon put an end to his peculiarities by killing him and boiling him down with peculiarly valuable oil. No, the reason was this, that from the fatal experiences of the fishery there hung a terrible prestige of perilousness about such a whale as there did about Rinaldo Rinaldini, insomuch that most fishermen were content to recognize him by merely touching their tarpaulins when he would be discovered lounging by them on the sea, without seeming to cultivate a more intimate acquaintance. Like some poor devils ashore that happen to know an irascible old man, they make distant, unobtrusive salutations to him in the street, lest if they pursue the acquaintance further, they might receive a summary thump for their presumption. But not only did each of these famous whales enjoy great individual celebrity, you may call it an ocean-wide renown, not only was he famous in life, and now is immortal in forecastle stories after death, but was admitted into all the rights, privileges, and distinctions of a name, and as much a name indeed as Cambyses or Caesar. Was it not so, or Tim or Tom, thou famed Leviathan, scarred like an iceberg, who so long didst lurk in the oriental straits of that name, whose spout was oft seen from the palmy beach of Bombay? Was it not so, O New Zealand Jack, thou terror of all cruisers that cross their wakes in the vicinity of the Tattoo Land? Was it not so, O Morquan, King of Japan, whose lofty jet they say at times assumed the semblance of a snow-white cross against the sky? Was it not so, O Don Miguel, thou Chilean whale, marked like an old tortoise, with mystic hieroglyphs upon the back? In plain prose, here are 4 whales as well known to students of cetacean history as Marius or Cinna, to the classic scholar. But this is not all. New Zealand Tom and Don Miguel, after at various times creating great havoc among the boats of different vessels, were finally gone in quest of, systematically hunted down, chased, and killed by valiant whaling captains, who heaved up their anchors with that express object as much in view as in setting out through the Narragansett woods. Captain Butler of old had in his mind to capture that notorious, murderous savage Anawan, the headmost warrior of the Indian King Philip. I do not know where I can find a better place than just here to make mention of 1 or 2 other things, which to me seem important as in printed form establishing, in all respects, the reasonableness of the whole story of the white whale, more especially in the catastrophe. For this is one of those disheartening instances where truth requires full as much bolstering as error. So ignorant are most landsmen of some of the plainest and most palpable wonders of the world, about some hints touching the plain facts, historical and otherwise, of the fishery. They might scout at Moby Dick as a monstrous fable, or still worse, and more detestable, a hideous and intolerable allegory. Thus, though most men have some vague, flitting ideas of the general perils of the grand fishery, yet they have nothing like a fixed, vivid conception of those perils and the frequency with which they recur. One reason, perhaps, is that not 1 in 50 of the actual disasters and deaths by casualties in the fishery ever finds a public record at home, however transient and immediately forgotten that record. Do you suppose that that poor fellow there, who this moment perhaps caught by the whale line off the coast of New Guinea, is being carried down to the bottom of the sea by the sounding Leviathan, Suppose that poor fellow's name will appear in the newspaper obituary you will read tomorrow at your breakfast? No. Because the mails are very irregular between here and New Guinea. In fact, do you ever hear of what might be called regular news direct or indirect from New Guinea? Yet I tell you that upon one particular voyage that I made the Pacific, among many others we spoke 30 different ships, every one of which had had a death by a whale. Some of them more than one. And 3 that had each lost a boat's crew. For God's sake, be economical with your lamps and candles. Not a gallon you burn, but at least 1 drop of man's blood was spilled for it. Secondly, people ashore have indeed some indefinite idea that a whale is an enormous creature of enormous power, but I have ever found that when narrating to them some specific example of this twofold enormousness, they have significantly complimented me upon my facetiousness, when, I declare for my soul, I had no more idea of being facetious than Moses when he wrote the history of the plagues of Egypt. But fortunately, the special point I here seek can be established upon testimony entirely independent of my own. The point is this. The sperm whale is in some cases sufficiently powerful, knowing, and judiciously malicious, as with direct forethought, to stave in, utterly destroy, and sink a large ship. And what is more, the sperm whale has done it. First, in the year 1820, the ship Essex, Captain Pollard of Nantucket, was cruising in the Pacific Ocean. One day she saw spouts, lowered her boats, and gave chase to a shoal of sperm whales. Ere long, several of the whales were wounded when, suddenly, a very large whale escaping from the boats issued from the shoal and bore directly down upon the ship. Dashing his forehead against her hull, he so stove her in that in less than 10 minutes she settled down and fell over. Not a surviving plague of her has been seen since. After the severest exposure, part of the crew reached the land in their boats. Being returned home at last, Captain Pollard once more sailed for the Pacific in command of the ship. But the gods shipwrecked him again upon unknown rocks and breakers. For the second time his ship was utterly lost, and forthwith, forswearing the sea, he has never tempted it since. At this day, Pollard is a resident of Nantucket. I have seen Owen Chase, who was chief mate of the Essex at the time of the tragedy. I have read his plain and faithful narrative. I have conversed with his son, and all this within a few miles of the scene of the catastrophe. The following are extracts from Chase's narrative. Every fact seemed to warrant me in concluding that it was anything but chance which directed his operations. He made two several attacks upon the ship, at a short interval between them, both of which, according to their direction, were calculated to do us the most injury, by being made ahead, and thereby combining the speed of the two objects for the shock, to effect which the exact manoeuvres which he made were necessary. His aspect was most horrible, and as such indicated resentment and fury. He came directly from the shoal which we had just before entered, and in which we had struck 3 of his companions, as if fired with revenge for their sufferings. Again, at all events, the whole circumstances taken together, all happening before my own eyes, and producing at the time impressions in my mind of decided, calculating mischief on the part of the whale, many of which impressions I cannot now recall, induce me to be satisfied that I am correct in my opinion. Here are his reflections some time after quitting the ship, during a black night in an open boat, when almost despairingly of reaching any hospitable shore. The dark ocean and swelling waters were nothing. The fears of being swallowed up by some dreadful tempest or dashed upon hidden rocks, with all the other ordinary subjects of my fearful contemplation, seemed scarcely entitled to a moment's thought. The dismal-looking wreck, the horrid aspect and revenge of the whale wholly engrossed my reflections, until day again made its appearance. In another place, page 45, he speaks of the mysterious and mortal attack of the animal. Secondly, the ship Union, also of Nantucket, was in the year 1807 totally lost off the Azores by a similar onset, but the authentic particulars of this catastrophe I have never chanced to encounter, though from the whale hunters I have now and then heard casual allusions to it. Thirdly, some 18 or 20 years ago, Commodore J, then commanding an American sloop of war of the first class, happened to be dining with a party of whaling captains on board a Nantucket ship in the harbour of Oahu, Sandwich Islands. Conversation turning upon whales, the Commodore was pleased to be skeptical touching the amazing strength ascribed to them by the professional gentlemen present. He peremptorily denied, for example, that any whale could so smite his stout sloop of war as to cause her to leak so much as their thimbleful. There we go, but there is more coming. Some weeks after the Commodore set sail in this impregnable craft for Valparaiso, but he was stopped on the way by a portly sperm whale that begged a few moments' confidential business with him. That business consisted in fetching the Commodore's craft such a thwack that with all his pumps going he made straight for the nearest port to heave down a repair. I am not superstitious, but I consider the Commodore's interview with that whale as providential. Was it not Saul of Tarsus converted from unbelief by a similar flight? I tell you, the sperm whale will stand no nonsense. I will now refer to you to Langsdorff's voyages for a little circumstance in point, peculiarly interesting to the writer hereof. Langsdorff, you must know by the way, was attached to the Russian Admiral Krusenstern's famous discovery expedition in the beginning of the present century. Captain Langsdorff thus begins his 17th chapter. By the 13th of May our ship was ready to sail, and the next day we were out to the open sea on our way to Koch, probably. The weather was very clear and fine, but intolerably cold that we were obliged to keep on our fur clothing. For some days we had very little wind. It was not till the 19th that a brisk gale from the northwest sprang up. An uncommon large whale, the body of which was larger than the ship itself, lay almost at the surface of the water, but was not perceived by any one on board till the moment when the ship, which, in full sail, was almost upon him, so it was impossible to prevent its striking against him. We were thus placed in the most imminent danger as this gigantic creature, sitting up its back, raised the ship 3 feet at least out of water. The masts reeled and the sails fell altogether, while we who were below all sprang instantly upon the deck, concluding that we had struck some rock. And in this we saw the monster sailing off with the utmost gravity and solemnity. Captain de Wolfe applied immediately to the pumps to examine whether or not the vessel had received any damage from the shock. We found that very happily it had escaped entirely uninjured. Now the Captain de Wolfe, alluded here as commanding the ship in question, is a New Englander who, after a long life of unusual adventures as sea captain, this day resides in the village of Dorchester, near Boston. I had the honour of being a nephew of his. I have particularly questioned him concerning the passage in Langsdorff. He substantiates every word. The ship, however, was by no means a large one, a Russian craft built on the Siberian coast and purchased by my uncle after bartering away the vessel in which he sailed from home. In that up and down manly book of old-fashioned adventure, so full too of honest wonders, The Voyage of Lionel Wafer, one of ancient Dampierre's old chums, I found a little matter set down so like just quoted from Langsdorff that I cannot forbear inserting it here for a corroborative example if such be needed. Lionel, it seems, was on his way to, quote, John Ferdinando, as he calls the modern Juan Fernandez. In our way thither, he says, about 4 o'clock in the morning, when we were about 150 leagues from the main of America, our ship felt a terrible shock. We put our men in such consternation that they could hardly tell where they were or what to think, but every one began to prepare for death, and indeed the shock was so sudden and violent that we took it for granted the ship had struck against a rock. But when the amazement was a little over, we cast the lead, and sounded, but found no ground. The suddenness of the shock made the guns leap in their carriages, and several of the men were shaken out of their hammocks. Captain Davis, who lay with his head on a gun, was thrown out of his cabin. Lionel then goes on to impute the shock to an earthquake, and seems to substantiate the imputation by stating that a great earthquake, somewhere about that time, did actually do great mischief along the Spanish land. But I should not much wonder if, in the darkness of that early hour of the morning, the shock was, after all, caused by an unseen whale vertically bumping the hull from beneath. I might proceed with several more examples, one way or another, known to me, of the great power and malice at times of the sperm whale. In more than one instance he has been known not only to chase the assailing boats back to their ships, but to pursue the ship itself, and long withstand all the lances hurled at him from its decks. The English ship Pusey Hall can tell a story on that head, and as for his strength, let me say that there have been examples where the lines attached to a running sperm whale have, in a calm, been transferred to the ship, and secured there, the whale towing her great hull through the water as a horse walks off with the cart. Again, it is very often observed that, the sperm whale, once struck, is allowed time to rally, he then acts, not so often with blind rage as with wilful, deliberate designs of destruction to his pursuers. Nor is it without conveying some eloquent indication of his character that, upon being attacked, he will frequently open his mouth and retain it in that dread expansion for several consecutive minutes. But I must be content with only one more and the concluding illustration. A remarkable and most significant one, by which you will not fail to see, not only is the most marvellous event in this book corroborated by plain facts of the present day, but that these marvels, like all marvels, are mere repetitions of the ages, so that for the millionth time we say Amen with Solomon. Verily, there is nothing new under the sun. In the 6th Christian century lived Procopius, a Christian magistrate of Constantinople, in the days when Justinian was emperor and Belisarius general, and many know he wrote the history of his own times, a work every day of uncommon value. By the best authorities, he has always been considered a most trustworthy and unexaggerating historian, except in some one or two particulars not at all affecting the matter presently to be mentioned. Now, in this history of his, Procopius mentions that during the term of his prefecture at Constantinople, a great sea monster was captured in the neighbouring Propontis, or Sea of Marmora, after having destroyed vessels at intervals in those waters for a period of more than 50 years. A fact thus set down in substantial history cannot easily be gainsaid, nor is there any reason it should be. Of what precise species the sea monster was is not mentioned, but as he destroyed ships as well as for other reasons, he must have been a whale, and I am strongly inclined to think a sperm whale, and I will tell you why. For a long time I fancy the sperm whale had always been unknown in the Mediterranean and the deep waters connecting with it. Even now I am certain that those seas are not, and perhaps never can be, in the present constitution of things, a place for his habitual gregarious resort. But further investigations have recently proved to me that, in modern times, there have been isolated instances of the presence of the sperm whale in the Mediterranean. I am told on good authority that on the Barbary coast, a Commodore Davis of the British Navy found the skeleton of a sperm whale. Now, as a vessel of war readily passes through the Dardanelles, hence a sperm whale could, by the same route, pass out of the Mediterranean into the Propontis. In the Propontis, as far as I can learn, none of that peculiar substance called brit is to be found, the aliment of the right way. But every reason to believe this food of the sperm whale, squid or cuttlefish, lurks at the bottom of that sea, because large creatures, but by no means the largest of their sort, have been found at its surface. If then you properly put these statements together and reason upon them a bit, you will clearly perceive that, according to all human reasoning, Procopius, a sea monster that for half a century stove the ships of the Roman Emperor, must, in all probability, have been a sperm whale. Though consumed with the hot fire of his purpose, Ahab in all his thoughts and actions ever had in view the ultimate capture of Moby Dick, though he seemed ready to sacrifice all mortal interests to that one passion. Nevertheless, it must have been that he was by nature and long habituation far too wedded to a fiery whaleman's ways altogether to abandon the collateral prosecution of the voyage, or at least, if this were otherwise, there were not wanting other motives much more influential with him. It would be refining too much, perhaps, even considering his monomania, to hint that his vindictiveness towards the white whale might have possibly extended itself in some degree to all sperm whales, and that the more monsters he slew by so much, the more he multiplied the chances that each subsequently encountered whale would prove to be the hated one he hunted. But if such a hypothesis be indeed exceptionable, there were still additional considerations which, though not strictly according to the wildness of his ruling passion, yet were by no means incapable of swaying him. To accomplish his object, Ahab must use tools, and of all tools used in the shadow of the moon, men are the most apt to get out of order. He knew, for example, that however magnetic his ascendancy in some respects was over Starbuck, yet that ascendancy did not cover the complete spiritual man any more than mere corporeal superiority involves intellectual mastership. For to the purely spiritual, the intellectual would stand in a sort of corporeal relation. Starbuck's body and Starbuck's coerced will were Ahab, so long as Ahab kept his magnet at Starbuck's brain. Still, he knew that for all this the chief mate, in his soul, abhorred his captain's quest, and could he, would joyfully disintegrate himself from it, or even frustrate it. It might be that a long interval would elapse ere the white whale was seen. During that long interval, Starbuck would ever be apt to fall into open relapses of rebellion against his captain's leadership, unless some ordinary, prudential, circumstantial influences were brought to bear upon him. Not only that, but the subtle insanity of Ahab respecting Moby Dick was nowadays more significantly manifested in his superlative sense and shrewdness, in foreseeing that, for the present, the hunt should in some way be stripped of that strange, imaginative impiousness which naturally invested it. That the full terror of the voyage must be kept withdrawn into the obscure background of a few men's courage as proof against protracted meditation unrelieved by action. That when they stood their long night watches, his officers and men must have some nearer things to think of than Moby Dick. But however eagerly and impetuously the savage crew had hailed the announcement of his quest, yet all sailors of all sorts are more or less capricious and reliable. They live in the varying outer weather, and they inhale its fickleness, and will retain for any objects remote and blank in the pursuit, however promissory of life and passion in the end. It is above all else, it is above all things requisite that temporary interests and employments should intervene and hold them healthily suspended for the final dash. Nor was Ahab unmindful of another thing. In times of strong emotion, mankind disdain all base considerations, but such times are evanescent. The permanent constitutional condition of the manufactured man, thought Ahab, is sordidness. Granted that the white whale fully incites the hearts of this, my savage crew, and playing around their savageness even breeds a certain generous knight-errantism in them, still, while for the love of it they give chase to Moby Dick, they must also have food for their more common daily appetites. For even the high-lifted and chivalric crusaders of old times were not content to traverse 2,000 miles of land to fight for their holy sepulchre without committing burglaries, picking pockets, and gaining other pious perquisites along the way. Had they been strictly held to their one final and romantic object, that final romantic object too many would have turned from in disgust. I will not strip these men, thought Ahab, of all hopes in cash. Aye, cash. They may scorn cash now, but let some months go by, and no prospective promise of it to them, and then this same quiescent cash all at once mutinying in them, this same cash would soon cashier Ahab. Nor was there wanting still another precautionary motive more related to Ahab personally. Having impulsively, it is improbable and perhaps somewhat prematurely revealed, the prime but private purpose of the Pequod's voyage, Ahab was now entirely conscious that, in doing so, he had indirectly laid himself open to the unanswerable charge of usurpation, and with perfect impunity, both moral and legal, his crew, if so disposed, that and competent, could refuse all further obedience to him, and even violently wrest from him the command. From even the barely hinted imputation of usurpation, and the possible consequences of such a suppressed impression gaining ground, Ahab must, of course, have been most anxious to protect himself. That protection could only consist in his own predominating brain and heart and hand, backed by a heedful, closely calculating attention to every minute atmospheric influence which it was possible for his crew to be subjected to. For all these reasons, then, and others too, perhaps too analytic to be verbally developed here, Ahab plainly saw that he must still, in a good degree, continue true to the natural, dominant purpose of the Pequod's voyage. Observe all customary usages, and not only that, but force himself to evince all his well-known passionate interest in the general pursuit of his profession. Be all this as it may, his voice was now often heard hailing the three mastheads and admonishing them to keep a bright lookout and not omit reporting even a porpoise. This vigilance was not long without reward. It was a cloudy, sultry afternoon. Seamen were lazily lounging about the decks, so vacantly gazing into the lead-coloured waters. Queequeg and I were mildly employed, weaving what is called a sword mat, for an additional lashing to our boat. So still and subdued, and yet somehow preluding, was all the scene, and such an incantation of reverie lurked in the air, and each silent sailor seemed resolved into his own invisible self. I was the attendant or page at Queequeg, who while busy at the mat. As I kept passing and repassing the filling or woof of marlin between the long yards of the warp, using my own hand for the shuttle, and as Queequeg, standing sideways, ever and anon slid his heavy oaken sword between the threads, and idly looking off upon the water, carelessly and unthinkingly drove home every yarn. I say so strange a dreaminess did there then reign all over the ship and all over the sea. only broken by the intermitting dull sounds of the sword, that it seemed as if this were the loom of time, and I myself were a shuttle maniacally weaving and weaving away the fates. There lay the fixed threads of the warp subject to but one single, ever-returning, unchanging vibration, and that vibration merely enough to admit to the crosswise interblending of other threads with its own. This warp seemed necessity, and here, thought I, with my hand I ply my own shuttle and weave my own destiny into these unalterable threads. Meantime, Queequeg's impulsive, indifferent swords, sometimes hitting the wolf slantingly, or crookedly, or strongly, or weakly, as the case might be, and by this difference in the concluding blow, producing a corresponding contrast in the final aspect of the completed fabric, the savage sword, thought I, which thus finally shapes and fashions both warp and woof, and this easy and different sword must be chance. Chance, free will and necessity, nowise incompatible, all interweavingly working together. The straight warp of necessity, not to be swerved from its ultimate course, its every alternating vibration, indeed, only tending to that. Free will, still free to ply her shuttle between given threads, and chance, though restrained in its play within the right line to necessity, and sideways in its motion, directed by free will, though thus prescribed to by both, chance by turns rules either, and has the last featuring blow at events. And thus we were weaving and weaving away when I started a sound so strange, long-drawn, and musically wild and unearthly. The ball of free will dropped from my hand, and I stood gazing up at the clouds whence that voice dropped like a wing. High aloft in the cross-trees was that mad gayhead attached to go. His body was reaching eagerly forward, his hands stretched out like a wand, and at brief, sudden intervals he continued his cries. To be sure, the same sound was that very moment perhaps being heard all over the seas, from hundreds of whalemen's lookouts perched as high in the air, but from few of those lungs could that accustomed old cry have derived such a marvellous cadence as from Tashtigo the Indians. As he stood hovering over you, half suspended in air, so wildly and eagerly peering towards the horizon, you would have thought him some prophet or seer beholding the shadows of fate, and by those wild cries announcing their coming. "There she blows! There! She blows! She blows!" Where away? On the lee beam about 2 miles off, a school of them! Instantly all was commotion. The sperm whale blows as a clock ticks, with the same undeviating and reliable uniformity, and thereby whalemen distinguish this fish from other tribes of his genus. "There go flukes," was now the cry from Tashtigo, and the whales disappeared. "Quick, steward," cried Ahab. "Time! Time!" Doughboy hurried below, glanced at the watch, and reported the exact time to Ahab. The ship was now kept away from the wind, and we went gently rolling before it. Tashtigo reporting that the whales had gone down heading to leeward, we confidently looked to see them again directly in advance of our bars. For that singular craft at times, evinced by the sperm whale when, sounding with his head in one direction, he nevertheless, while concealed beneath the surface, mills round and swiftly swims off in the opposite quarter. This deceitfulness of his could not now be in action, for there was no reason to suppose the fish seen by Tashtigo had been any way alarmed, or indeed knew at all of our vicinity. One of the men selected for shipkeepers, that is, those not appointed to the boats, by this time relieved the Indian at the main masthead. The sailors at the fore and mizzen head come down, the line tums were fixed in their places, the cranes were thrust out, the mainyard was backed, and the 3 boats swung over the sea like 3 samphire baskets over high cliffs. Outside of the bulwarks, their eager crews with one hand clung to the rail while one foot was expectantly poised on the gunwale. So look, the long line of man-of-war's men about to throw themselves on board an enemy ship. But at this critical instant, a sudden exclamation was heard that took every eye from the whale. With a start, all glared at dark Ahab, who was surrounded by 5 dusky phantoms that seemed fresh formed out of air. And thus brings our current point in the story to an end. So, This particular section of the book definitely emphasizes a lot of the classical American values, shall we say. The fixation heavily upon, for instance, the glorification of whiteness in all its forms. And of course, the recurring reiteration of biblical elements, which definitely runs heavily through as a constant undercurrent of this novel, the reliable comparisons between, of course, the tale of Jonah and Moby Dick will of course always be important parallels, intended and heavily built upon. It also shows that despite the aspirations of classical Americanism as a melting pot, the inherent disregard and tendency to misconstrue willfully or otherwise elements and cultures of other cultures and their practices is felt very tangibly in so many portions of this, including the amusing irony of someone who is so potently religious claiming to not be superstitious. But this is where we end. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Impasto, as well as this continued reading of Moby Dick. Tonight, I will send you forward the Crossbite, who is currently playing Scorn. We will return tomorrow with a collection of games. All from the same developer, beginning with a title called Inhuman, and ending in a title that is probably not in need of additional introduction. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, please do all that you can to enjoy the remainder of your evening. And as always, take care and good night.